Greetings. Each week, I'm going to be posting a lecture highlight covering the chapter or chapters that we are going over each week. So today, I'm going to be going over Chapter 1, Managing and Performing, the basics of what is management. But before I get started, I wanted to just say if you have any questions in the class about the textbook, policies, or any general question, please post them to the class questions forum or found under the discussions link, or email me directly at laura.dunphy@mvc.edu, or set up a time during my office hours to have a Zoom meeting. Just send me an email, and I'm very flexible. We don't even have to do it during my office hours, but we can just set up a time for us to talk one-on-one. So let's get started with Chapter 1. So to get started, what is management? And management is getting things done with the organizational resources. Now, what are the organizational resources? It's not only the people, which is the biggest element, being able to do it through the people, not being a micromanager where you do it all, but seeing people's strengths, knowing who can do what really well, and being able to manage through them, but also the financial resources. And I'm going to show you a visual for this that kind of breaks down each element to show you the breadth of what is involved with a really effective manager. But the information flow and inflow and how does information flow within the organization, and of course the equipment. So those are those pieces. It seems pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into it and a lot of different skill, because you need to be a skilled communicator and a team player. And I mentioned that micro manager, which I'm sure some of you've heard of it or you might have experienced it, where sometimes someone's very good at their job, but they have a hard time working through other people, so they really want it done their way, and they really want to take part in every element of it. And it's very challenging to have a manager like that, and it actually stifles the success of an organization. So I started my management experience probably 19 years ago when I was a sales associate at Miller's Outpost, which we don't have Miller's Outpost anymore, but we do have Anchor Blue. And I was a sales associate, and I did show some of those communication skills. And so they moved me up to an assistant manager position, even when I was still, I was 19, I'm giving away my age, but I was young. And so that's why I say whatever job you're in, even if you're working at a fast food restaurant, try to take on those leadership roles, because it gives you invaluable experience and it's completely transferable, the skills you'll learn about management across the platforms. And if it's with a bigger corporation, they usually have some really good management training. I got really good management training when I was still in my teens. And then I was able to move into other management positions, and I had the foundation. And so one thing, so I do suggest, if you are a manager, or if you're still even just working as a sales associate, take on those voluntary responsibilities. So I was also, when I was in Toastmasters, which I promote in all my classes, it's like a club that works on your professional skills of speaking, but also how to run a meeting, which is another aspect that's so important in management, is knowing how to run meetings, get things done effectively, how to set them up. And I have lots of leadership roles that you can participate in and not worried about getting fired. So you can get that training, put it on your resume, can give you management experience at that element. But I was the president of that club, I think when I was in my early 20s. I was the youngest member at the time, and I was the president of the club. So I ran the whole club for, I believe it was 6 months. And that really helped. Also, if you're in management, we're going to talk about too, is leading people who are older than you, who are younger than you, that are across different generations. And you got to be tailor your management style, or maybe not style, but how you give them information, how you train them, depending on their unique needs. And so being able to work with people from a diversity of backgrounds, if you can get experience in that, it's just going to help you. And then now I am the department chair overseeing faculty, which is a completely different dynamic because we're union-based. And it creates, and we'll talk about the different styles. Each one of those workplaces requires a completely different style of how you manage the responsibilities in an organization. So I do recommend and to understand that every type of organization has a different management style, but it gets back to that, the workers, the financial resources, the information, the equipment, but you need to understand the culture within with what it's revolved in. So let me break down the 4 main areas that a manager needs to oversee. Okay, so the 4 main areas of functions and management is a planning element, leading, organizing, and controlling. You can see this in your textbook, which goes over these elements as well. But really, setting organizational goals, it should all come down from top to the bottom. You want to do that planning phase. And we'll talk about this next, how important that planning phase is, because everything should go back to the strategies, the goals that you have in place. And you got to make sure that if you're an assistant manager or a store manager, that you know what the overarching goal, mission, and vision is of the corporation. So you can make sure that everything you do going down matches up with that. And so when you're first coming into a company, or if you move up into a company, into a leadership role, make sure you revisit their goals, their strategic goals that they have, so that you can look and do a good analysis of where the company is now and what are some strategies you might be able to use to strengthen that alignment with the goals that you have. And then through those goals, you can guide and motivate your staff to see the vision of the company. And that's that difference between a good manager and a good leader, which we'll talk about in a moment too. And really for company success, being able to be a good leader and manager is so invaluable. And then there's organizing, the allocating the resources, making sure you're being efficient with your resources. The number one thing you're probably going to get pressure for is to cut the bottom line, cut costs, cut staffing, which is a major problem, because if you're understaffed, what happens to customer service? What happens to the stress levels of your employees, which we'll be learning about too? It's not machines. We're dealing with people. So that's why there's a lot of psychology in management. I encourage, if you're thinking of a minor, psychology is a great minor. The best managers I've seen usually have a really good foundation in psychology and people skills, emotional intelligence, because again, we're not machines. You can't just cut costs and expect nothing else to change. And so everything has those big picture reactions, which we'll talk about some case studies in this class. Because it's not always just cutting the bottom line. You got to be able to see the big picture. And of course, measuring and having and seeing if you're meeting your objectives and what you should do to change. So there's a lot of strategy involved. It's very dynamic, and we'll be going over each aspect. But what I want to talk about is that planning, because it's so foundational, is to know what the vision is and the mission is of the company. So sometimes people get those two confused. So let's go over that in a little more detail. So the vision is where the company plans to go in the future. So this is where you are when you're at your pinnacle of success, and you want to be able to communicate that to your employees, your managers and your employees, so that they can begin to have actions that are start pulling them in that direction. Instead of just saying, well, this is where we are today, and this is where we're always going to be. By empowering people and inspiring them to see where we could go, can help you reach that vision. So let me give you a vision of a popular company, is to be the best quick service restaurant experience. And look at that. It's not saying being the highest quality or the best restaurant and have the best experience. It's very tailored, that they're in a market. They're in the best quick service restaurant. So knowing what market you're in can really help you be the best for what your target base is looking for from you, and an experience. So those things are something that I'll be pulling out, and we'll see how they actually implement that in the vision. So it sets the purpose of the organization. Can you guys guess what company this is? It's McDonald's. So McDonald's, that is their vision statement. It's clear, it's crisp, and they can break it down to show you how they're going to implement that. So employees need to be empowered to fulfill this. And in order to fulfill it, that's when the mission statement comes into play. So they say you should know what the vision and mission statement is of your company. And usually it's hanging up on the wall, but a lot of times people don't know it. So some really good managers will get their employees to memorize it. But the biggest thing is that you're backing up that mission with your with your reward system. So if you have any types of incentives, that they are tied to that mission, so you're being genuine to this. or else, because people, it's not what you tell them, it's what you show them, right? Just with parents, right? With kids, you could tell them to do X, Y, Z, but if you yourself are not implementing X, Y, Z, they're going to do what they see. And the same thing is for a good manager. So you personally, as a manager, need to be making sure you're backing up the mission with action. And if they get into a situation where they're going to lose money, let's say with improving to make sure it's quick or to make sure it's a good experience, that they need to have certain actions that increase the bottom line. You're not making as much money, but it's withholding the standards you have for your mission. As a manager, you need to let that go and say, no, it is more important that we have our vision intact than just have a bottom line. So I'll be talking about that a lot because that's the biggest pressure that you have in management is cutting costs, and that it's not worth it. So if you can show, and I'll be giving you lots of case studies and statistics to show that in the long run, taking care of your customer base, taking care of your employees, and having your mission and vision lining up with action creates a more successful business, and year over year will give you long-term success over short-term gains. So from that vision statement, you can define the mission. So the vision is always first. And then you say, okay, what is that purpose? What is that vision in the company? And how are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to become the best quick service experience for our customer base? And it should be based on those core values, which we'll talk about core values a little bit later. So let me show you what McDonald's mission statement is. So it's longer because you have to put actions and how you're going to actually implement that vision. So this is McDonald's mission: to be our customers' favorite place and way to eat and drink. Now this isn't everybody, it's their customers, their target market. And I'll talk about target market in all my classes, but it's that 20% of the people who come into your business, but they come so often that they're giving you 80% of your sales. Those are the people you really want to target. That it's their favorite place and way to eat and drink. We're dedicated to being a great place for people to work. So if you're a manager, you're going into your McDonald's and you want to survey the staff and see if it is a great place for them to work. And if not, it's something you want to work on because it's part of your mission to give that overall vision. And that might show you where an area of weakness might be. Another one is being a strong and positive presence in the community. They do have Ronald McDonald House. They have one in Loma Linda. And it's basically if a family or if someone is sick, the whole family can stay at the Ronald McDonald House, which is right next to Loma Linda Hospital for free. And so that they're putting things in place so that they can have that presence. So you want to make sure you have an action point to each one of your mission statements. How can I prove that we're achieving this? And then that they are delivering the quality and service, cleanliness, and value our customers have come to expect from the Golden Arches. So expect versus a 4-star quality. A lot of people do not expect the McDonald's hamburger to be great tasting the next day, but they do expect a consistent flavor with their shakes, their French fries, and their hamburgers. And when you walk in, there's a certain level of cleanliness. So again, you can test that. Now they've done a lot to implement this. If you do some research, or even if you watch the movie The Founders, which goes over the history, they've implemented now too so much equipment to have the exact time for how long the fries cook, how long the burgers stay on the grill, so there's a consistency in that level of quality. So they've actually invested quite a bit of funds into that. And then, the last part is just that the Golden Arch is a symbol that's trusted around the world. There's McDonald's all over the world. And it's a really interesting case study because they really focus on the demographics and specialized menus depending on what country they're in, even what city they're in. Like I mentioned, Loma Linda, they have a different menu options in Loma Linda than they do in Riverside because there is a larger vegetarian population in Loma Linda. And they know that due to demographics. So they offer vegetarian options in Loma Linda, and they also offer it in Redlands, and they might offer it in like the surrounding cities because they really want to highly target those areas. So they become a trusted symbol around the world. If you've traveled and you've gone to one in another country, The menu could be totally different. The whole experience can be different. Some of them are a little more upscale. Some of them, like if you go to Germany, they sell beer because that rhyme is aligned with the target market there. So it's really interesting to follow some of these companies and see how they're lining up their mission, and to ultimately have them have more success. So now from that mission statement, you create your goals and objectives. So it has to start from you have to have a solid understanding of what really is the vision and mission of your company before you can start making those goals and objectives. So let's move on to that next. So with goals and objectives, this is true for your personal goals and objectives as well as your business goals and objectives. Goals are the broad, long-term accomplishments to obtain, very similar to that vision statement. They're usually shorter, and they inspire you. But then the objectives is like the mission statement where it's specific, short-term, how are we going to achieve this goal? And that's when it gets a little challenging. So we experience this with any major goal that we have. Like a personal one would be if you're going to a personal trainer, you have a goal of losing weight, right? So the goal is, I want to lose 20 pounds. What is the trainer going to say? Well, what period of time do you want to lose this in? Let's start bringing this down to, well, what's a logical or what is a realistic amount of weight to lose per week and per month? And if you have an unrealistic goal, I want to lose 20 pounds in a week, it's unrealistic. So you got to make sure, and I'll talk about in the next slide, of how to make SMART goals. So SMART goal setting is, again, being specific. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be achievable, realistic, and timely. So all of those goals that you have in your personal life too, is to write it out. So let's say your boss says we need to increase customer service across all of our stores, and you're a manager in one of the stores. You need to be very specific. What does that mean? Should we just have a goal that says have the best customer service, and then what are some objectives we can have from that? So we actually had this in our company. We said we want to increase customer service. So some of the measurable attributes to having good customer service for us is when the phone rings, someone picks it up by the third ring. Because after that, people start thinking, are people not there? It might have even been 2 rings. I can't remember exactly, but you be very specific. And then you might say that you greet them with certain verbiage, or when you walk into a store that each client you say hello to, and you tell them what the sale of the day is, and you let your employees know that that is one of the objectives of having good customer service. And then you might have surveys for your client or for your customer base, and you want to have a certain rating. So let's say you have a low customer service rating and you want to improve it. You want to have realistic that you're not going to have 100% of customers love the customer service, because there's just some people you can't please. They're just in a bad mood. So you might have it be that we want to have 60% of the surveys that we get back to be 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. And then next month we want to increase it. So that can help. And if your higher up boss gives you a goal and they don't give you good objectives, ask them, well, what does that look like? Can I have a few objectives, for example, and get them and list it out? Because if you just give arbitrary goals to your employees, they have no idea. It's just like asking someone to draw a tree. You're going to get all kinds of different looking trees, and it's not going to be the same vision that you have in your mind. So if you want to give someone a vision, you got to paint it out for them and make it as clear with objectives of how to reach that and how to be successful and what you're looking for as their boss. So again, you can do this for your life as well. Always put a time aspect to it as well. Like, we're going to review this and see if we can increase those scores or increase this across the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and at the end of the year. And we're going to analyze if there's been improvements in this. And then you can test it. You can go in, you can call, see if they answer the phone after the second or third ring, if they give you the greeting that you're looking for, and you can actually rate them across some clear objectives. So I'm going to give you an example that happens very often. This happened to me when I was working in healthcare. And it happens in a lot of companies where you get a new manager and they go in and they don't look at the mission and vision, or they do, but they don't really back their actions up to the mission and vision. They back it up to the bottom line, because that's what they're going to get recognized with from their higher ups, is, are you making a profit? That's usually what the biggest pressure is how to balance the bottom line with the human element and the mission and the vision and maintaining it. And it takes some creative thinking, and really it takes having a big picture and understanding that how all the moving parts work with an organization, and really what are the sacrifices to be made and when, and be strategic about it. So let me give you an example. So the mission statement of the company I worked for, we were a 24-hour skilled nursing facility. The mission is to assist our employees in providing 5-star patient services for every person served. So think about that. You really want to have 5-star patient service. Those employees better have the backing, the support that they need. They need to be happy in order to give 5-star service. So if you cut staffing, you cut certain elements, you're going to create stress, and they're not going to be able to give you that 5-star service. So understanding the bigger picture, and I'll tell you a very small thing, and this is why psychology is so important. And then the tagline was, caring is our main concern. Now, if the goal is cutting costs, we had a new administrator that came in. He looked at what we were spending our money on, and he would look at line by line, like even our how high our AC was, and if we could cut that, we could save this much money. What type of toilet paper are we using? If we make it a little cheaper, we'll save this much money. So, and this is why a lot of companies are hiring administrators and hire supervisors and managers who have a finance degree, because their main concern, it seems like their mission statement is to cut the bottom line. But really, to have long-term success, you need to have someone who understands that element, but also really understands the human element, right? So what this administrator did is for the day staff, we had Starbucks coffee. For the residents who would come in, not residents, but the visitors who would come in, you'd have Starbucks coffee, a higher end coffee than just the regular break room coffee. And the staff was able to have that Starbucks coffee if they worked the day shift. And they would also offer it at night, typically. That's how it was. Now, when this new administrator came in, he says, that's a lot of money. They could just have the break room coffee. It's no different. And the day staff can have the Starbucks coffee, because we're not going to, pull it away or tell them not to use it when it's open. We should put it away and add a site for the night staff. Do you think the night staff noticed? Yes. Is the night shift harder than the day shift? Yes. So taking that away, do you think it inspired them to want to give better service? Or did they feel a little stifled by it? Did they feel like it was a little unfair? They were being treated substandard than the day staff. So understand that it actually caused quite a ripple and actually made them not very friendly towards a new administrator. A simple move as just changing out a cheaper coffee. They notice. They're not machines. So that's one of the things, is you got to understand the human element, because if you really want to, if part of your mission is to assist your employees so that they can give the best service possible, jipping out on something as simple as coffee is counterproductive and actually can completely go against what your mission is in the company. So even though that seems simple, those little things are what separates really good managers and leaders for ones who are just looking at the bottom line. It's really easy to just look at the bottom line and cut everything without thinking it through. So now let's look at the next element. So this leads us to managerial skills. And the importance of those skills varies depending on the level of manager you are. So really, there's technical skills that are very important, human relations skills, like I was just talking about, and conceptual skills. So again, those technical skills are the people who are really good at their jobs. Those are usually the ones that get promoted because they're good at their jobs. And so you want them to kind of train and lead other people. And they usually move up to an assistant manager position. And then they can move up even higher than that. Now, the problem is sometimes people who have very good technical skills may not have the best human relations skills. And you may notice this in some industries where they don't really choose good managers. They choose the people who are just really good at their jobs. But all these other aspects are very important. And I'll show you on the next slide. And it talks about in your book how it changes. The importance of each one of these elements changes the higher up you go, in depending on where you're at in the managerial hierarchy. There's human relation skills, which is the communication and motivation, the ability to work through and with people. And that's that ability to see that even dripping on coffee makes a big deal. Sometimes it's those little things that aren't very expensive that will go a long way. And then conceptual skills is to be able to see the big picture and all the moving parts and the relationship among parts to help see where should we be going in the future, what kind of big changes should we have. So let's talk about which ones are most important at what phase of the management hierarchy. Okay, so at the very bottom, my screen's covering it. It's your first line managers. It's your assistant managers and your managers of, like, let's say it's depending on the hierarchy of the organization. Those technical skills are the most important because they're the ones that are overseeing the people who are on the front lines actually using the equipment or using the processes and procedures that are in place. They need to know and answer questions like, oh, how do I do this? And why this equipment broke? How do I fix it? Or be able to show them efficiencies. Those human relations skills are still the next most important element. And that's because you're dealing directly with those people and you need to understand the big picture conceptual skills of like where we should be moving as a company, and those maybe mergers and acquisitions. That's not as important, but you still need to have an understanding. It's very important to still understand that there's a bigger picture beyond just your position and the position that you hold and the people that are on the front line. Then you might move up to a whole store manager, or you might even go to a regional, depending on how big the company is. And those technical skills are still important so that when you come in to review and look at things, you can give them that feedback, but it's at a much further distance. And those human relations skills are, it's almost about 50-50 across, all equal. You need to have technical skills, you need to have human relations skills, and those conceptual skills start getting bigger because you need to look at those stores and see all the different departments and be able to see how they all engage with each other on a bigger scale. And then you move up to like those CEO positions, and those technical skills are not nearly as important. And sometimes in these cases, they can be very detached from what people actually do and still be successful, but it is beneficial if they do have a technical understanding of what the industry is like, what each employee and department goes through. And of course, those human relations skills are important, but it becomes the conceptual skills now that are so important to have. So understanding what your strengths are, it doesn't mean that you should be moving up to the CEO position if you don't have that skill set. And don't just bring someone up into the CEO positions or even the middle managers just because they're really good at their job. And so that's one of our elements when we're hiring managers and we're promoting managers is we get lost in the concept that if you're just really good at your job, you should be in that leadership position. Sometimes the people who are just really good at motivating, listening, and understanding psychology, and you do need to understand those finances, sometimes are better equipped to handle those positions because sometimes they'll burn bridges like that one administrator did. He didn't last long, and they actually went through quite a few administrators because they were really hyper-focused on cutting the bottom line, which is important. But it's not, there's a double bottom line that's even more important, which is your mission and vision, which I'll be talking about a lot in this class. So I touched on this earlier, but really the difference between management versus leadership. A person can be a good manager, but not a good leader. And really you're having that good leadership skills is really what makes a difference for having really happy employees. So leadership is really creating that vision for others to follow, establishing those corporate values and ethics that are coming from the vision and mission, not just the values of the bottom line, and transforming businesses to improve effectiveness and efficiency through people. If people are happy, you have a lot less problems. Now, management, and my screen is covering a little bit of this, but it's really just carrying out leadership's vision and not taking it on yourself and trying to empower it through those arenas. So basically, you're not thinking through, because if you're just taking directions from the top, you're not including that what you know about your staff, who you're closer with, because you're on the front lines with them. The supervisors above you don't understand the dynamics of the coffee. You need to see the bigger picture to be able to make that decision and say, yes, that does cut cost, and they want me to cut cost, but I have the understanding of the corporate values, and I'm closer to the source to know that this is actually going to go against some of our corporate cultures, or not corporate cultures, but our mission and vision. And that's that difference between just following orders and not thinking it through and seeing the bigger picture with that and having that human element. Now let's talk about you and your career. So this is getting back to that human element is social and emotional intelligence. It's basically the skills of understanding yourself, managing yourself, and dealing effectively with others. And that's why sometimes I say people who really good managers like themselves, because then they're more likely to like others. So that's one way to tell is you want your managers to like their employees. And if you don't like yourself, you're less likely to like other people. And that's true in a lot of arenas. And there's something called social capital. It's the goodwill stemming from your social relationships. Goodwill. It's really hard to quantify. But they actually did this to my dad. He worked in management. He was an administrator for over 30 years. But he got older, and as we look when we talk about human resources, you get you peak out on your pay scale usually after 20 years of working at a company. And what are these companies doing coming in with these financial advisors? Let's cut cost. So your highest paid employees are usually on the older side. And even though there's laws protecting, there's age protections in place, but they can find ways to cut the highest paid people in positions and then just fill those positions with brand new graduated people, and they could pay them at the bottom of the pay scale. They won't say it directly, but it happens. Well, they did try to do this. I mean, that is my impression. They tried to do this to my dad when he was about 66, around that age. He was getting, older, and they basically changed the job description, which is a little out of scope of this class, but and then they brought someone else in who was younger. But one thing they realized when the new administrator came in is he didn't have any connections to the community. He didn't know who people were. He didn't have that connection with all the inner working parts that someone who's worked at a company for 30 years, there's the goodwill, there's social capital that you can't put a price tag on of people they know who to talk to when there's a problem. They understand all those inner working parts, and it's invaluable. And they actually hired him back because, and they actually put in quotes, you have goodwill. The amount of goodwill that you have is the social capital that we really value. And could you come back? So understanding this and respecting this in a company, which in a human resources class, we'll talk about this, that you need, if people are going to retire, realize that they don't just do their job. There is social capital and there's connections that they have with social relationships that you need to try to have them pass that down to someone else. So having someone under their wing for a while, which a lot of companies, they just don't have time or the resources to do this. Someone retires and a new person comes in with maybe 2 weeks of training when they really needed years. They needed years to gain that valuable social relationship and social capital. So understanding this now, if you're going in as a manager, work with your human resources team to say who's retiring. We need to have a plan in place because it is invaluable, even if it's overlooked by your higher up management. Now let's go on to additional aspects of you and your future career. So networking is really important, and just being having an eye for future career growth and change. And they say the statistic now for graduates, they're going to have many, many more careers and jobs than previous generations. So previous generations may have had 1 or 2 jobs their entire lives. They work for a company for 30 plus years and then they retire. And now we're really seeing a major shift and change in that. So you might, even me, I've had multiple positions across many different careers or industries. I've worked in retail, I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in GIS software. I've moved to Hawaii and worked for a utility company. So being comfortable and just getting skills that are transferable, I highly recommend. So being both a specialist and a generalist. So in your industry, learn as much as you can about the inner working parts, because then you have a lot of flexibility to grow within that company, but also move into a completely different industry, especially if you're in management, completely transferable. You can be a manager of a fast food restaurant and you can transfer into being a manager in a completely different industry. And really try to be self-reliant and learn as much as you can. And if you have to ask for help for something, learn how they're doing it so you can potentially, when they retire, know how to do those things. So just keeping your eyes out and not just sticking to just doing your job. Because one other thing that they have studied is majority of our employees are checked out, which means they just come into work, they do their job, and they clock out and they go home. They're not really trying to be engaged, look at what needs to be improved, observe what other people are doing. And so then when those positions, like someone leaves, gets fired, or retires, no one knows what they were doing, and you lose a lot in that arena. So if you want to be moving up into management, just keep an eye for what everyone is doing, and help them out, and be as self-reliant as you can. Connect with others and network. It's so important, because the higher up you get into an organization, the more important it is to network. Like we were talking about social equity, or not social equity, social, that there's actually value in that goodwill and the social interactions that you know. Getting to know the UPS driver, getting to know the people that are coming in and out of your organization is going to help you in a multitude of ways. And then actively manage your relationship with your organization. Do not be passive. Ask questions and be engaged, and you will move up if you just ask questions, because like I said, majority of the staff are completely checked out. So if you just ask a question, they see that you're not the zombie that's just wanting to get in and out and doesn't care. And that's really showing that engagement that sparks interest in our managers. So those are some things to think about. So it does talk about the various leadership styles in your text, but what I really wanted to focus on is how the various leadership styles are important depending on what industry you're in. And that's why I think it's really good to be, if you can be in management positions in multiple arenas. For example, I was in retail. I did volunteer leadership, which is totally different. You can't pay them or fire them. You got to try to empower people who are voluntarily being part of an organization. And then in higher education, which is on the far right. So the far left, I've never been in complete autocratic. And autocratic is really where you tell them what to do. Like if you're an EMT, or if you're in battle in the military, you don't want to sit down and ask questions of your boss when you're in an emergency situation. So there are times when that's really important, where managers make the decisions and they just announce it to you and you follow. But if you are, let's say you've been in the military and then you go into healthcare, which we actually had, people coming into healthcare who had military experience, and they had a little rough patch, because now you're dealing with the majority of our staff were females in the nursing industry, and they like more democratic. Let's talk about the issues and come to a conclusion. And sometimes there was a little bit of a learning curve with changing industries. So that's something with the training and the management training program, is to understand that different management styles fit with different organizations. So as you move across this arena of having the boss-centered leadership all the way to support subordinate-centered leadership, which we even call free reign. And I had this when I was in marketing, where my boss didn't tell me what I did. He wanted me out in the field, so out marketing to different doctors, case managers, doing presentations for, I think it was like 60% of my day. And then I'd come in and do paperwork and analyze and prepare presentations and things like that for about 40%, maybe it was even 20%. But I wasn't told where to go, what presentations to do. I was just given the goal, and then I was able to go out and do it with a lot of flexibility. But that's what was tailored to that position, versus when I was in retail, when I was still a associate, just a sales associate, I was told what to do all the time, and I wasn't even allowed to sit down. Don't think that was really the best type of management structure, but every moment of my 8-hour day, I was told what I should be working on. So it varies and it depends, and you've got to be careful. Like for example, as a chair right now, I'm overseeing. I'm not really the boss of the faculty. I have to really help guide and be more of a leadership role. And it's totally free reign. You give them goals and you give them objectives, and it's up to them to meet those goals and objectives. So understanding that can really help you in business to be effective with the type of environment that you're in, what type of leadership style is going to work, and how much of the authority by manager should be used. And you really want to use it with caution, because if you burn your staff and you're not the expert and you're using that authority in it like an expert-based field, like even with nursing, you're not the nurse, and you're telling your nursing staff how to handle a situation, it can be really challenging. So understanding those dynamics can really help you be a more effective manager. This leads me to empowerment. If you're not going to be having that authority over every action that your employees are doing, you want to give them empowerment, and you need to effectively train them to know how to do their job. You don't want to just leave them out there and say, here are the goals, you figure it out. And in that case, you need to have a good training program. So effective leaders give employees authority to make decisions without consulting a manager within, of course, boundaries, right? Whenever they can, let them do it, because it gives them more authority over their day, and it gives them ownership. You want them to feel that connection to their organization. They don't want to just be told what to do. People want to be trained, and even kids. If you hear kids when they hit about 2 or 3, they're like, I want to do it. I want to do it. They want that authority. They want as much authority as they can have. They want that empowerment. And so as much as you can, you want to give that to your staff. And because not only does it take it off your plate to do, but they'll get straight to customer service much quicker than if they have to call their manager for everything. So if customers need to be handled quickly, like Starbucks does this. If you have a drink and you don't like it, you can take it right up to a sales associate, and they can say, that's fine, I'll make you a new one. They don't have to get approval from a manager for every little tiny change. They might have a certain amount they can give out of free food. Let's say if you waited in line for a long time, or they did mess up your drink, that they can give you a free scone or a free treat on the house, and they have that empowerment to do so. It actually increases the customer service. But again, you need to give them the education and tools and need to make those decisions. So listen to them, ask them what they need, and see if they can effectively give it to you. So the Ritz-Carlton is another really good case study for excellent training, because they have Ritz-Carlton is a high-end hotel. So doing some research on some of these high-end places shows you the training that they do for their staff in order to reach that mission of being a high quality, high customer service organization. And they train their staff, and a lot of stores have actually used this method, that if you asked where something is at a Ritz-Carlton, they were trained, I don't know if they're still up to these standards, where any sales associate, or not any associate, which I forget the name that they call them, they might be called, it's not cast members, but they have certain names for their titles to even show that they're part of the team, is they'll walk you to that location, even if it's far away. So in the grocery store, you might see some of these organizations are implementing this, where it feels much more better customer service if you ask where something is in a grocery store, instead of them just saying, oh, it's in aisle 24 and it's at the very top. What if they walk you over there and show you exactly where that product is? It's just that extra level of training, right? But you got to sometimes train them on it. So having really good training programs and giving them the tools so that when it is time for them to make those decisions, they make the decisions that you think that they should make, right? With flexibility in mind. And that's, I think, really important. Okay, this is the last slide. This is a little bit of a longer lecture. Usually my first one is a little longer because I'm going over the broad spectrum of really what we're going to be discussing bit by bit in this class. So this is the last slide. It really goes into the difference of a good manager to a good leader. And these are some common practices of successful executives, because you want to implement this even when you're an employee, implement some of these things, is ask what needs to be done, not just what do you want to do. So talking to your staff and the people who are on the front lines and see what needs to be done. Then they write action plans. They don't just think, they do based on sound ethical plans, right? So having a plan in action, not just taking in what your employees say and say, okay, yeah, that sounds like something we really need to do. And then it lays flat, which a lot of times people just don't have time. They don't have a structure for what they do with the feedback that they get. If you actually write down the feedback, you have an action plan, and you're basing it off that mission. That's that ethical plan. You're not just looking at the bottom line, which is so tempting in business. That's why every business class or business major, you have to take an ethics class, because it's just part of that system. If it's free market, there's a chance to make unlimited profits. And with unlimited profits can come the factor of greed. So you have to keep that ethical element in place to hold yourself accountable. And taking responsibility for your decisions and your actions. That's one of the things that's just going to help you in life. And even when you're an employee, it's just saying that absolutely what I say a lot of moving forward. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. That was a bad decision. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Um, Moving forward, or what can I do better next time? Aspects like that, and just taking responsibility instead of blaming others is something that's just very helpful for everyone in a business environment. And the last one is focusing on opportunities rather than problems. And so this is another one from a book I really like, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Even the one that was written in the 60s is still excellent because the concepts are so foundational to being successful. Is sometimes the way you're looking at the problem is the problem. So the entrepreneurial mindset, and I'll talk about this, is coming in and thinking creatively. And so you could do a lot of activities to strengthen the creativity of your brain and not thinking of problems, but thinking of opportunities. Because it's really about how you're looking at it, and don't just see it on face value. You want to give yourself the opportunity to say, well, maybe we don't need that department anymore. Maybe we can retrain and completely transform this aspect of our business and go into a completely different market. So being able to see opportunities where other people see problems is good at any level of life. So hopefully you found this lecture interesting, and you'll get a high-level overview of some of the aspects that we'll be covering in this class. And if you have any questions, please post them to the class questions forum or email me directly. I'll see you guys next time.